You know, this feeling. You were supposed to be asleep hours ago. But here you are, thumbs scrolling, eyes burning, chasing one more post, one more video, one more something. You're not even sure what you're looking for anymore, but you can't stop. In a world built to connect us, we've never been more wired or more trapped. Every sound, every vibration, every flicker of light has been designed to reach inside your head and pull something ancient, something primitive. It's not technology anymore, it's architecture. An invisible design shaping what you want, how you think, who you are. This is the architecture of addiction. And the men and women who built it didn't set out to make prisons. They set out to make progress. Once upon a time, Silicon Valley dreamed of changing the world, and it did, just not the way it meant to. They promised freedom, but what they built was dependency. They gave us tools and turned them into triggers. They gave us connection and turned it into currency. They gave us choice and buried it beneath an avalanche of infinite options, and the rest of us, we didn't notice. Because the prison was invisible. Because it was beautiful. Every tap, every scroll, every pause, recorded. Every moment of hesitation, analyzed. Every habit, reinforced. This isn't coincidence, it's design. Deep inside those servers, the most powerful algorithms in human history aren't studying mathematics. They're studying you, your fears, your cravings, your loneliness, your attention, that last fragment of autonomy we still believed was ours. We built a civilization that runs on human focus. And then we surrendered it in exchange for convenience. Somewhere out there, a handful of engineers sit in air-conditioned offices, tuning algorithms like musical instruments, playing symphonies on the strings of our attention. Every like, every share, every refresh. A note in a song that never ends. But what happens when the song becomes noise? When we can't stop listening, even when we want to? We are the first species in history to be programmed by our own inventions, to live in spaces built not from stone or steel, but from desire. And if this is a prison, then who built it? Was it the tech companies, the engineers, the algorithms? Au roi tu es. The users who couldn't look away. This is not a story about technology. It's a story about architecture, about how our world was redesigned to keep us watching, scrolling, buying, believing, and how the walls we built for convenience became the bars that hold our minds. But every system has a flaw, every prison an exit. And sometimes freedom begins not by breaking out, but by waking up. Dites-le. The architect who built prisons for the mind, you weren't forced into this prison. You volunteered. 1. The invisible architect. Some architects design cities. Others design cathedrals. And then there are those who design us. For most of human history, architecture was about space, about what we built around us. But in the 21st century, a new kind of architect appeared, one who builds inside us. His materials aren't steel or stone. They're dopamine, attention, and code. In the beginning, Silicon Valley wanted to help. These were the dreamers, building search engines to make knowledge accessible, apps to keep in touch with friends, videos to educate and entertain. The mission was noble, to empower humanity through technology. But somewhere along the line, empowerment became entrapment. Inside companies like Google, Facebook, and TikTok, the culture began to shift. The question was no longer, how can we make this useful? It became, how can we make this irresistible? And one man, years later, would admit exactly what they built. We built slot machines into billions of pockets. Tristan Harris joined Google in his 20s, an idealist. Armed with a degree from Stanford and a moral compass most engineers still believed they had. His job title was design ethicist, a phrase so new it sounded almost contradictory. He was supposed to ensure technology aligned with human values. But instead, he discovered that the company and the industry around it was systematically redesigning human behavior. Every buzz, every vibration, every red notification badge was crafted not for convenience, but for craving. Each swipe downward on your feed mimicked a slot machine lever, releasing a hit of dopamine whenever a new post appeared. You never knew what was coming next. A friend's message, a like, a video, a controversy. That uncertainty made it addictive. Variable roi, let's call it. The same psychological mechanism that keeps gamblers glued to their seats now keeps billions glued to screens. Back at Google's consequences, designers weren't asking how to improve lives, but how to increase engagement. Meetings were no longer about innovation, they were about retention. The longer a user stayed, the more ads they saw. The more ads they saw, the more money the company made. It wasn't evil, exactly, it was math. Soon, entire teams were hired to study and manipulate micro-behaviors, how fast a user scrolls, how long they pause on a video, what color of button triggers the most clicks. This data fed into algorithms designed, not to inform, but to predict and provoke. Somewhere, quietly, Silicon Valley stopped building tools and started building habits. What began as a social network became a social nervous system, rewiring the way humans relate, learn, argue, and even love. The invisible architect wasn't just a person. It was an entire industry learning to weaponize attention. Tristan Harris eventually left Google disillusioned, warning anyone who would listen. He compared smartphones to a supercomputer pointed at your brain, optimized to exploit psychological vulnerabilities most of us don't even know we have. These companies aren't competing for your money. They're competing for your mind. Every scroll, every tap, every notification of kind design keeps you in the loop. We think we're using the tools, but what if the tools are using us? Across the world, billions of people reach for the same glowing rect every Bible would be design. The invisible architect doesn't need walls or bars to hold us captive. All he needs is our attention. And as our screens light up once again, a question lingers. When did software become a drug? 2. The dopamine, Blueprint Las Vegas, and Silicon Valley have more in common than they'd ever admit. Both learned how to sell an illusion. Both discovered that the easiest way to trap a human being is not with chains, but with anticipation. In the casino, the blue lights for you to stop, fast to turn, for the lights to scream jackpot. In the digital world, the player is you. Swiping, refreshing, scrolling, waiting for the next post, the next like, the next hit. Different arenas, same principle. Back in the 1950s, psychologists discovered something strange about the human brain. If you reward a rat with food every time it presses a lever, it presses only when it's hungry. But if you reward it sometimes, at random, the rat keeps pressing endlessly. That unpredictability, the maybe, the almost, is what hooks it. This became known as the variable reward system. Casinos turned it into an empire, and, decades later, tech companies turned it into a business model. When you pull down your feed to refresh, you're performing the same physical gesture as a slot machine lever. Your thumb is the lever. Your brain is the gambler and the jackpot. A new post, a funny meme, a tiny digital affirmation that says, "You still matter." Each hit releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter that teaches your brain to repeat pleasurable behaviors. The more you scroll, the more often you're rewarded, and the stronger the loop becomes. But it's not just the scroll. Every feature in your favorite app has been engineered to tug a precise psychological string. The like button, a microdose of validation. It doesn't just show appreciation. It turns social interaction into a measurable currency, infinite scroll. No natural stopping point, so your brain never receives the cue to rest. It's like walking down a hallway with no exit signs, just door after door, corridor after corridor, and push notifications. They're not reminders, they're summons. Every buzz tells your nervous system something's happening without you, the architecture of anxiety. What looks like harmless design is actually a behavioral map. Engineers study every flicker of your attention, every moment you hesitate before closing an app, and feed that data back into an algorithm that learns how to keep you there longer next time. You think you're wandering freely, but the corridors were drawn long before you entered. Each feature, each sound, each color, a doorway leading deeper into captivity. Red notification badges instead of blue. Rounded icons that feel softer, safer. Endless content because endings make people leave. The digital architect knows the perfect prison is the one where the prisoners never realize they're locked in. Inside your skull, dopamine whispers, "Stay a little longer." Your mind mistakes stimulation for satisfaction. And while you chase that next hit, the system measures, learns, adapts, turning your impulses into a predictable equation. Some call it innovation, others call it colonization of the mind. In Vegas, the house always wins. Online, the algorithm does. The dopamine blueprint isn't hidden in secret labs. It's coded into every feed, every game, every app that keeps you scrolling at 2 a.m., a billion-dollar design language written in the chemistry of desire. This isn't just how addiction happens. It's how addiction is built. Addiction isn't an accident. It's an industry. 3. How to build a perfect prison in the late 18th century. A philosopher named Jeremy Bentham designed what he called the Panopticon. It was a perfect prison, not because it was brutal, but because it was efficient. Imagine a ring of cells, all facing inward toward a single watchtower. From the tower, one guard could see every prisoner. The prisoners, however, could never see the guard. They never knew when they were being watched. And that uncertainty made them behave as if they always were. No chains, no locks, just the idea of surveillance, so powerful the prisoners policed themselves. Centuries Panopticon, only steam, colors. We called it the Internet. Every search, every scroll, every pause is observed, not by a guard, but by an algorithm. A system that doesn't sleep, doesn't blink, doesn't forget. When you hover over a video thumbnail for half a second, the system records that hesitation. When you linger on a post, it learns what holds your attention. When you skip a story too quickly, it learns what doesn't. Each gesture becomes data, tiny fingerprints of curiosity. Together, they form a portrait of you. You are not just a user. You are a dataset, an evolving psychological model designed to predict desire before you feel it. And what's most unsettling is that it works. Inside the offices of major platforms, engineers and analysts don't talk about truth or value. They talk about retention, the art of keeping you there. They measure it down to the second, how long you linger on a clip, how often you reopen an app, how many times you scroll before you get bored. If that number drops, the alarms go off. If it rises, bonuses follow. Every design choice, color, shape, sound, motion is tested and tweaked through A/B testing. 2 versions of reality shown to millions of people at once. Whichever keeps you longer wins. You think you're choosing what to watch. Butin tested. 1 version keeps users for 12 seconds longer. That's victory. At scale, 12 seconds per person means millions of extra at impressions, millions more data points to feed back into the machine. This is what engagement optimization means, teaching an algorithm to exploit your instincts better than you ever could resist them. The algorithm doesn't just record what you do. It anticipates what you'll do next. It learns the rhythm of your emotions, the time of day you're lonely, the topics that outrage you, the faces that make you linger just a second longer. Before you know what you want, it already does. This is the new Panopticon, a tower built not of stone, but of servers. Its gaze is invisible, constant, and intimate. We don't fear it. We feed it. We feed it every time we swipe, every time we click, every time we think we're choosing freely. But freedom needs friction. And friction is what this system removes. Everything is designed to feel effortless, and in that effortlessness, our agency dissolves. The old prisoners of Bentham's design could at least look up and see the tower. Where can on lust? Because the guard isn't watching us. Et tout suitin is a digital mirror trained to reflect our every impulse, until we become predictable enough to control. In this perfect prison, no one forces you to stay. You click the door open yourself. And with each click, you feel more free, even as you lose the power to choose. 4. The addiction economy every empire is built on a currency. The Romans had gold, the industrial age had oil, and the digital age has attention. If time is money, then attention is gold dust, mined, refined, and sold to the highest bidder. But there's a darker truth beneath this transaction. Because in this new economy, addiction isn't a byproduct. It's the business model. When social media began, the goal was simple: connect people. But connection doesn't pay shareholders. Attention does. Somewhere inside the glass towers of Silicon Valley, the metrics changed. The question shifted from how many people use our product to how long can we keep them using it? That's the number that drives Wall Street. And in the attention economy, time equals revenue. In 2010, Facebook made $2 billion in ad revenue. By 2023, that number had exploded past $130 billion. TikTok, barely a decade old, followed the same curve, its profits soaring in direct proportion to the hours it could extract from its users. Because every extra minute you spend staring at a screen means one more ad served, one more click tracked, one more data point monetized. To keep those numbers climbing, platforms didn't just compete for your time, they competed for your psychology. The most profitable platforms aren't the ones that serve your needs. They're the ones that manufacture them. Inside these companies, teams of behavioral scientists and UX designers work on what's called persuasive design. It's the science of engineering habits, turning human attention into predictable behavior. We didn't call it manipulation. We called it engagement. They studied the brain's vulnerabilities the way advertisers once studied demographics. What color makes you click faster? What notification sound makes you stop scrolling? What kind of video makes you forget the clock? One former Facebook executive admitted, "We built tools that exploit human psychology. And we did it knowingly. Every viral challenge, every like streak, every endless feed, not innovation, but instrumentation. Every new feature is be tested against millions of users to see which version hijacks your attention most effectively. The result. A marketplace where you are the product. Your emotion, your routine, you're for sale." In 2021. Internal leaks from Facebook's research teams confirmed what many had suspected. Instagram was shown to increase anxiety and depression in teenagers, especially girls. Executives knew, but acknowledging it meant losing engagement. And engagement meant money. This is what it looks like when an industry monetizes the human nervous system. TikTok's algorithm learns your preferences in hours, not by asking, but by watching. It tailors your feed to trigger the exact emotional rhythm that keeps you from closing the app. Each swipe is worth fractions of a cent multiplied by billions of swipes a day. It's not about showing you what you love. It's about keeping you addicted to what you can't stop watching. We used to joke that our real customers weren't users, they were advertisers. The usentorienti system, attention is in real time. Advertisers bid for your eyes, your clicks, your desires every second of every day. The longer you stay hooked, the more valuable you become. And so, the apps get smarter, the algorithms get hungrier. 5. How to build a perfect prison in the late 18th century. A philosopher named Jeremy Bentham designed what he called the Panopticon. It was a perfect prison, not because it was brutal, but because it was efficient. Imagine a ring of cells, all facing inward toward a single watchtower. From the tower, one guard could see every prisoner. The prisoners, however, could never see the guard. They never knew when they were being watched. And that uncertainty made them behave as if they always were. No chains. No locks. Just the idea of surveillance, so powerful the prisoners policed themselves. Centuries Panopticon. Only steam. Colorism. We called it the Internet. Every search, every scroll, every pause is observed, not by a guard, but by an algorithm. A system that doesn't sleep, doesn't blink, doesn't forget. When you hover over a video thumbnail for half a second, the system records that hesitation. When you linger on a post, It learns what holds your attention. When you skip a story too quickly, it learns what doesn't. Each gesture becomes data, tiny fingerprints of curiosity. Together, they form a portrait of you. You are not just a user. You are a dataset, an evolving psychological model designed to predict desire before you feel it. And what's most unsettling is that it works. Inside the offices of major platforms, engineers and analysts don't talk about truth or value. They talk about retention, the art of keeping you there. They measure it down to the second, how long you linger on a clip, how often you reopen an app, how many times you scroll before you get bored. If that number drops, the alarms go off. If it rises, bonuses follow. Every design choice, color, shape, sound, motion is tested and tweaked through A/B testing. 2 versions of reality shown to millions of people at once. Whichever keeps you longer wins. You think you're choosing what to watch. Butin tested. 1 version keeps users for 12 seconds longer. That's victory. At scale, 12 seconds per person means millions of extra ad impressions, millions more data points to feed back into the machine. This is what engagement optimization means: teaching an algorithm to exploit your instincts better than you ever could resist them. The algorithm doesn't just record what you do. It anticipates what you'll do next. It learns the rhythm of your emotions, the time of day you're lonely, the topics that outrage you, the faces that make you linger just a second longer. Before you know what you want, it already does. This is the new Panopticon, a tower built not of stone, but of servers. Its gaze is invisible, constant, and intimate. We don't fear it. We feed it. We feed it every time we swipe, every time we click, every time we think we're choosing freely. But freedom needs friction. And friction is what this system removes. Everything is designed to feel effortless, and in that effortlessness, our agency dissolves. The old prisoners of Bentham's design could at least look up and see the tower. Where can on lust? Because the guard isn't watching us. Et suite is a digital mirror trained to reflect our every impulse, until we become predictable enough to control. In this perfect prison, no one forces you to stay. You click the door open yourself. And with each click, you feel more free, even as you lose the power to choose. 6. The feedback loop of loneliness we were promised connection. World where technology would bring us close distance, collapse team, loneliness bath. And in some ways, it did. We can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. But somehow, in this web of endless connection, we've never felt more alone. It's a paradox of the digital age. The more connected we become, the more isolated we feel. Psychologists call it the feedback loop of loneliness. The same apps designed to connect us end up feeding the very emptiness they promise to cure. The brain doesn't distinguish between social connection and social validation. Each notification feels like belonging, but it's temporary. Every message, every like, every streak becomes a small hit of presence, a whisper of connection. But when it fades, we're left emptier than before. So we reach for the phone again, scroll again, swipe again. The pattern repeats, a digital heartbeat of craving and relief, craving and relief. That's the loop. And it's tightening. In the architecture of modern life, screens have become the walls and corridors of our new cities. They organize our time, our emotions, our attention, but they also isolate us inside perfectly customized realities. Each feed is a mirror, reflecting only what we already like, already believe, already fear. The world narrows. Our comfort zones become our prisons. I talk to people all day online, but when I put my phone down, it's like no one's really there. Asterisk, asterisk, we live in a crowd that doesn't touch. A conversation that never ends, yet never really begins. The loneliness is measurable. Studies show that heavy social media users report higher rates of anxiety, depression, and social disconnection. But it's not just emotional, it's neurological. Our brains adapt to the constant stimulation, craving the instant validation that digital connection provides. Real relationships, slow, imperfect, unpredictable, begin to feel exhausting by comparison. So we retreat further into the loop, chasing connection through the very system that steals it. Social media gives us the illusion of intimacy without the risk of vulnerability. It's safer to like than to listen. Safer to comment than to confess. We perform closeness instead of living it. And the system rewards us for the performance. The lonelier we feel, the more we engage. The more we engage, the more data we produce. And the more data we produce, the better the algorithm becomes at keeping us lonely, because loneliness drives activity. That's the cruel symmetry of the attention economy. It feeds on the hunger it creates. Every connection leaves a residue of comparison, envy, and self-doubt. We measure our lives against curated illusions, mistaking visibility for worth. And when reality fails to compete with the digital world's perfection, we retreat deeper into the scroll. The loop closes. We seek comfort in the same mechanism that causes the pain. What makes this addiction unique is that its withdrawal symptom is loneliness, and its cure is the thing that caused it. Asterisk, asterisk, connection was supposed to free us. Instead, it became the architecture of isolation, a system that monetizes our longing to be seen, while teaching us to live without truly seeing each other. We built a network of billions, but somewhere in the static, we lost the signal that mattered most. So now we have to ask, what happens when the thing that connects us disconnects us most? 7. The Great Escape. Every prison has an exit, but you have to see the bars first. For years, we've stared at our screens, searching for connection, meaning escape, never realizing we were building the walls around ourselves. But what happens when the prisoners start to wake up? A quiet resistance has begun. It doesn't march in the streets or trend on hashtags. It moves one phone at a time, one mind at a time. They call it digital minimalism, a philosophy born not out of fear of technology, but out of exhaustion. Its believers don't reject progress, they reclaim control. They speak of intention, using devices as tools, not tethers, setting boundaries, turning off the noise, relearning what silence feels like. It's not about deleting everything. It's about deciding what deserves space in your mind. Another movement calls it dopamine fasting, a phrase that sounds clinical, almost absurde. It's the practice of stepping away from digital highs long enough to let the brain reset, to remember what real satisfaction feels like when it isn't engineered. For the first few days, it feels like withdrawal. Your hand twitches for the phone. Your mind reaches for the endless scroll, but then, slowly, the fog lifts. You begin to notice the space between thoughts, the weight of stillness. These experiments aren't cures, they're reminders. Reminders that attention is finite, and that where we spend it becomes who we are. Some designers, the same ones who helped build the attention machines, are now trying to dismantle them from within. They call for humane technology, interfaces that respect our time instead of exploiting it, apps that end instead of loop, algorithms that serve curiosity instead of addiction. We realized we weren't designing tools anymore. We were designing traps. It was time to redesign the cage. In this movement, design becomes moral architecture, just as ancient builders shaped temples to uplift the mind. These reformers imagine digital spaces that restore attention rather than fracture it. The ancients understood something we've forgotten. Our environment shapes our behavior. If you build a room of chaos, people grow restless. If you donne un gros calme. Today's challenge is to build an architecture of freedom, a digital world designed not to confine thought, but to expand it. Freedom isn't deleting your apps or fleeing technology. It's remembering that you still have a choice. The Internet was meant to connect us. It still can. But only if we stop confusing endless stimulation with meaning and start designing a world that values attention as a sacred resource, not a commodity. Maybe escape isn't a dramatic act. Maybe it's a quiet refusal, a decision to look up, to step outside the screen's glow and remember the texture of real life. Every prison has an exit. But first, you must see the walls, because the truth is the architect didn't lock the door. Where did? The door was always open, and so we return. Where screenasil room? A heartbeat caught between one more scroll and the courage to stop. For years, we thought the prison was the phone, the apps, the algorithms, the corporations, the architects. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe the walls were never around us. Maybe they were within us. Because a prison built for the mind doesn't need steel or guards. It just needs your attention. And once it has that, it has everything we gave it willingly. We traded silence for stimulation. We traded solitude for validation. We traded time, the only currency we can never earn back, for the comfort of never being alone. The truth is, the system didn't steal our freedom. It ran it, one notification at a time. And while we pointed fingers at the engineers and the algorithms, we forgot to ask ourselves the hardest question of all. Why did we want the cage? We built technology to make life easier. But somewhere, we made ease our highest goal. And in the pursuit of comfort, we lost the art of resistance. When every distraction is one tap away, discipline becomes rebellion. When every opinion is prepackaged, thinking becomes an act of courage. When every moment is filled, silence becomes the rarest luxury. We used to imagine freedom as movement, the ability to go anywhere, do anything, connect with everyone. But maybe true freedom has always been the opposite, the ability to sit still, to choose where to look, to decide when enough is enough. The algorithms will keep learning. The feeds will keep refreshing. The attention economy won't collapse overnight. But somewhere inside you, There is still a quiet space that no one can track or monetize, and that is where escape begins. Because every prison has an exit, every loop can be broken. Every architect, however brilliant, leaves a flaw in their design. And the flaw, iau. When you see the structure, you can step outside it. When you see the manipulation, you can reclaim your mind. Freedom isn't deletion, it's discernment. It's looking at the glow of the screen and choosing not to answer its call. We don't need to smash the machine. We just need to stop feeding it. The architect built the walls, but only we could give them power. And just as we once learned to build the prison, we can learn to build something else, a world that values focus more than noise. Depth more than data, presence more than performance. There will still be screens. There will still be algorithms. But perhaps, if we learn to look up, to listen again, to choose, then maybe the next architecture we build will be one that sets us free,